My name is Henry. I'm 60 years old, and until that cursed day, I thought I knew what pain was. Turns out I had no idea. For 35 years, I woke up before dawn, dragged my aching back to the warehouse, and worked until my hands bled. Every night I came home to my wife, Lisa, thinking I was building a life worth something. I believed hard work and loyalty were enough. I believed love was about endurance. I was wrong. That Saturday morning, my life collapsed. Quietly at first, then all at once. We'd taken a trip upstate to visit her cousin. 2 hours on the bus, Lisa scrolling through her phone, smiling at messages I wasn't allowed to see. I stared out the window, pretending not to notice. Because sometimes pretending hurts less than knowing. When we arrived, the town felt like a ghost story. Just a small, dusty station surrounded by cracked asphalt and tired little shops. Lisa wanted to look around, buy sweets from a local stand. My knees hurt, so I told her I'd wait on a bench. She looked at me like she'd been waiting years to explode. "Always sitting, Henry, always tired," she said. Her voice was sharp enough to cut. "You're 60 going on 90. I'm sick of living with an old man who's done nothing with his life." People around us turned to stare. I could feel their eyes burn through my skin. "Lisa, please," I whispered. "Not here." She laughed. That cruel, bitter laugh I hadn't heard in years. "Not here? Then where, Henry? In that miserable apartment we can't even finish paying for? Look at us, in a filthy train station in the middle of nowhere. We can't even afford a real vacation." Each word was a punch to the chest. I wanted to tell her that I tried, that I worked my whole life to make her happy, but the truth stuck in my throat. I reached for her arm, hoping to calm her down. She yanked away as if I'd burned her. "Don't touch me. I don't want you to ever touch me again." The silence that followed was worse than her shouting. Then she did something I still replay in my mind every night. She reached into her purse, pulled out my wallet and my ID, and for a second I thought she was handing them to me. Instead, she looked straight into my eyes and said, "Better yet, I'll keep these. After all, what do you need them for out here?" "Lisa, what are you doing?" My voice cracked. She didn't even blink. "I'm leaving you, Henry. Right here, right now. You can walk home if you want, or you can rot here for all I care." Then she turned, walked across the square, and climbed into the same bus that had brought us. I saw her say something to the driver. He looked at me once, pity in his eyes, and drove off. I just stood there frozen, watching the bus disappear down the dusty road until it became nothing but a blur of heat and distance. My knees trembled. My chest felt hollow. That was it. 35 years of marriage gone like a puff of smoke. The sun beat down hard. The world around me was silent, except for a few flies and the distant hiss of wind. I looked around. A woman with 2 kids waiting for a train, a vendor selling roasted peanuts, and an old man on the opposite bench wearing dark glasses and holding a white cane. A blind man. I sat down, buried my face in my hands, and for the first time in decades, I cried. I didn't care who saw me. The tears came from somewhere deep, somewhere I didn't even know existed. I cried for the years I'd lost, for the love I'd given, for the humiliation I couldn't escape. How did it come to this? How did a life of quiet sacrifice end in such cruel silence? Minutes passed, or maybe hours. I don't know. Time stopped meaning anything. Then I heard a voice beside me, calm but firm. "Excuse me, young man." I wiped my face and looked up. The blind man was facing me, his head tilted slightly as if he could see right through me. "Are you talking to me?" I asked, my voice rough. "Yes," he said softly. "I heard everything. I'm sorry for what just happened to you." I shook my head. "Thank you, sir, but I'll be fine." "No," he said, his tone suddenly sharper. "You won't be fine, but you can be if you listen to me." Before I could respond, he leaned closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. "I need you to pretend something for me, just for a few minutes." I blinked, confused. "Pretend? Pretend what?" He smiled, a strange, knowing smile. "Pretend you're my son. My private driver will be here in 5 minutes, and your wife is going to regret leaving you next to the richest businessman in this city." I froze. His words hung in the hot air like smoke. "Pretend to be your son?" I said slowly. What are you talking about? He straightened up, adjusting his glasses. My name is Frank. Frank Sterling. And just like that, everything changed. The name Frank Sterling hit me like thunder. Even a man like me, scraping by on warehouse wages, knew that name. He was the owner of Sterling Foods, the biggest processing company in the state. Hotels, farmland, trucks that carried his logo from city to city. A man whose fortune was whispered about in the news. Someone you only saw on magazine covers or in charity galas. And here he was, sitting on a cracked wooden bench in a half-abandoned train station, wearing dark glasses and holding a white cane. I didn't know whether to laugh or run. Mr. Sterling? You can't be serious, I stammered. Why would someone like you? He cut me off with a calm gesture. Why would a blind old man sit next to you in this forgotten place, you mean? He smiled faintly. Because not everything that looks lost is worthless, Henry. Sometimes we end up in strange places for a reason. He said my name. My pulse stopped for a moment. I never told you my name. I heard your wife say it, he said simply. And I heard every word she spat at you. She's cruel, Henry, but her cruelty might be your greatest blessing. My throat tightened. I didn't know what to say. Sir, I whispered, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I don't even understand why. Because, he interrupted again, his voice suddenly low and heavy. 30 years ago, I lost my only son. He was about your age back then. He was kind, hard-working, and one night he died on a road not far from here. Since then, I've lived with a hole in my chest that no money can fill. He turned his face toward me, and for a moment I could see the sorrow hidden behind those dark lenses. I can't bring him back, Frank said quietly, but I can help someone who reminds me of him. And maybe, for a few minutes, you can help me remember what it felt like to be a father. I didn't know how to answer that. My mouth opened, but no words came out. Before I could think of anything to say, a deep rumble broke the silence. A car engine, smooth, powerful. It grew louder, closer. I turned my head and saw it. A black BMW SUV, spotless, gleaming under the harsh sunlight, pulling into the station parking lot. The tinted windows reflected everything around them like mirrors. The kind of car you only see in movies or in the driveways of men who never have to check their bank accounts. A tall man in a black suit got out, holding a phone to his ear. He spotted Frank immediately and hurried over. Mr. Sterling, I'm so sorry for the delay. Traffic on the highway was brutal. Don't worry, Stephen, Frank said, waving a hand. You're right on time. Then without hesitation, he turned to me and said, Help me up, son. My body froze. The driver was looking at me now, curious. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest. Go on, Frank whispered. Call me Dad. Just this once. Every instinct screamed that this was insane. I was a stranger, a broke, abandoned old man sitting in a forgotten station. But there was something in his voice, calm, commanding, but also full of quiet grief, that made me move. I stood, took his hand, and helped him up. Here, Dad, I said under my breath. The driver smiled politely. Good to see you again, sir, he said to me, as if this was completely normal. We were worried when you didn't answer your phone earlier. Left it at home, I muttered awkwardly. Frank squeezed my hand just slightly, a small, steadying gesture. Come, son, he said aloud. Let's go home. The driver opened the rear door, and Frank gestured for me to slide in first. The seats were soft leather, cool against my sweat-soaked shirt. I had never sat in a car like this before. It smelled like money, polish, and quiet power. As the car rolled out of the station, I looked through the tinted window. The bus that had taken Lisa away was long gone, the horizon empty except for the dusty road and the faint shimmer of heat. I thought of her face, that cruel smirk when she said I had nothing, and now here I was, sitting next to the richest man in the city, being called his son. Frank sat with perfect posture, his cane resting between his knees. He looked peaceful, almost content. Stephen, he said to the driver, let's take the long road back. I'd like my son to see the countryside. It's been a while. Yes, sir, Stephen replied, glancing at me in the mirror. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to cry. None of this made sense. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. Someone saw me. Someone called me son. As the car glided down the road, sunlight flashing off the hood, I glanced at Frank. Why me? I asked quietly. He smiled faintly. Because, Henry, I believe people don't meet by accident. And maybe, just maybe, we can both heal what life took from us. Outside, the hills rolled by in green and gold. I didn't know where we were going, but wherever it was, it had to be better than where I'd been left. For the first time since Lisa walked away, hope flickered, small but alive, somewhere deep inside me. The BMW hummed down the quiet country road like a dream I wasn't supposed to be in. Every bump, every turn reminded me that I didn't belong there. I was a warehouse worker pretending to be the son of a man whose signature could buy entire city blocks. Frank Sterling sat beside me, calm as if this was the most natural thing in the world. His dark glasses caught the sunlight, his hands resting lightly on his cane. The driver, Stephen, kept his eyes forward, professional and silent. The only sound inside was the faint whisper of air conditioning and the rhythmic hum of the tires. For a long time, neither of us spoke. My thoughts were a storm. Lisa's laughter echoing in my ears, her face as she left me behind, the cruel words she threw like knives. You're nothing, Henry. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was all some cruel joke the universe was playing on me. But then as the car curved along a hill and the trees parted, I saw it. The Sterling estate. The driveway alone was longer than any street I'd ever lived on. Wrought iron gates opened silently as we approached. Beyond them stretched manicured gardens, fountains, and a mansion that looked like something out of a movie. White stone, tall windows, and a balcony that caught the last light of the setting sun. I swallowed hard. You live here? Frank chuckled. Yes, son. For far too long I've lived here. Stephen parked at the base of a marble staircase. The door opened automatically, and before I could think, Frank said quietly, You first, Henry. I stepped out, my worn shoes touching perfect white stone. A man in uniform opened the front doors. Inside was a cathedral of glass and light. The air smelled faintly of cedar and wealth. A woman in a gray dress, perhaps a housekeeper, appeared. She bowed slightly. Welcome home, Mr. Sterling. Dinner will be ready soon. Frank nodded. Thank you, Maria. And this, he said, gesturing toward me, is my son, Henry. He'll be staying with us. I froze. Her eyes flicked to me. Not judgmental, not surprise, just accepting. She smiled politely. Of course, sir. Welcome, Mr. Henry. It took everything in me not to laugh from the absurdity. Mr. Henry, as if I belonged there. Frank led me to a dining room the size of my entire apartment. The table gleamed like water under the chandelier. Silver, crystal, linen. Every detail screamed of a life I'd never even dared to imagine. We ate quietly for a while, or rather, I ate. Frank only nibbled at his soup, content to listen. Finally, he broke the silence. So tell me, Henry, what did you do for a living? Warehouse, I said, ashamed. 35 years. Loading crates, driving forklifts. Nothing special. He tilted his head slightly. Nothing special? My boy, 35 years of honest work is the definition of special. The world forgets men like you built it. No one had ever spoken about my work like that. I didn't know whether to thank him or cry. I don't know what to say, sir. He smiled. Say, Dad. We've started something now. Might as well keep the act consistent. I hesitated, then said softly, Thank you, Dad. The word felt strange on my tongue, like something borrowed but comforting. He reached across the table, his hand finding mine with surprising accuracy. His touch was warm, steady. Henry, I may be blind, but I see more than most. You've been carrying a lifetime of shame that isn't yours to carry. Let me tell you something. The moment she walked away from you, your life didn't end. It began. I felt a lump rise in my throat. You don't even know me. I don't need to, he said gently. Pain recognizes pain, and I know what it is to lose everything you thought you were. After dinner, Maria showed me to a guest room. Though room didn't feel like the right word. It was bigger than my entire apartment. A king-size bed, a view of the gardens, a bathroom with marble floors and gold faucets. I touched the sheets, soft, cool, clean. For the first time in my life, I slept without the sound of neighbors arguing through the walls, without worrying about bills, without hearing the creak of cheap furniture. In the morning, sunlight filled the room. When I came downstairs, Frank was already at the breakfast table sipping coffee. "Good morning, son," he said, smiling. "I hope you slept well." "I haven't slept like that in 40 years, I said honestly. He laughed, softly. "Good. You'll need your strength. I want you to stay here for a while. Help around the estate. I could use the company, and I think you could use the peace." I opened my mouth to protest, but he lifted a hand. "No arguments. You're doing me a favor. And don't worry about money or work. You'll find plenty to do here." And that was how it began, my strange new life. The days passed slowly, peacefully. I helped the gardeners fix a shed. I cleaned the garage. I read aloud to Frank from the newspaper every morning. The house staff grew used to seeing me. They treated me not as a guest, but as family. At night, I'd sit with Frank by the fire. He'd tell stories about his youth, his first business, his late wife, and the son he'd lost. Sometimes he'd fall silent mid-sentence, his fingers tightening around his cane, and I knew the memories hurt. I'd sit quietly beside him, not saying anything, because some pain doesn't need words, only presence. One evening, as the fire crackled and the air outside turned cold, he said, "Henry, I can't see faces anymore, but when I hear your voice, it feels like I've known you all my life." I looked into the flames and whispered, "Maybe we were both just waiting for someone to find us." He nodded slowly. "Maybe so, son. Maybe so." Days turned into weeks, and every morning I woke up feeling a strange mixture of disbelief and gratitude. The Sterling estate had become my world, and yet it still felt surreal, like I'd stepped into someone else's life and somehow survived the transition. I started with small tasks, mowing the lawns, fixing fences, organizing deliveries. At first, the staff looked at me with polite curiosity. They didn't know what to make of me, a stranger, yet introduced as the son of Frank Sterling, but Frank treated me as if it were natural. "Henry, I need you to check the warehouse inventory," he said one morning. "Come with me, and I'll show you what's important." For the first time in decades, I felt useful, not as a laborer scraping by paycheck to paycheck, but as someone who mattered. I walked beside Frank through his sprawling business empire, listening, learning. He explained contracts, negotiations, and strategies with the patience of a teacher and the wisdom of a man who had seen it all. It was exhausting, far more than any warehouse shift, but in a way that filled me rather than drained me. I discovered that my mind, long dulled by repetitive labor, could still grasp complex ideas. I found myself laughing again, genuinely, at stories Frank told of business blunders and eccentric clients. One evening we sat by the fire sipping tea. Frank turned to me, his dark glasses reflecting the flames. "You're different from anyone I've ever met," he said. "You carry the weight of years, yet you still have kindness in your heart. That's why I wanted you here. That's why I called you my son." I wanted to tell him the truth, that I was broken, abandoned, scared. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I nodded. "I'm grateful, Dad," I whispered. He smiled faintly. "You don't know how long I've waited to hear that from someone. Not a child by blood, but someone who cares, someone who understands." As days turned into weeks, my presence at the estate became routine. I helped Frank organize his office, learned to manage some of the smaller business operations, and even attended meetings with associates. Each encounter was a lesson, and each lesson slowly rebuilt my confidence. One afternoon, as I walked the gardens, I overheard a conversation between the estate manager and a client. They spoke of Frank Sterling's only son, who had died 30 years ago. My chest tightened. I realized something then. I wasn't just pretending anymore. I was becoming part of Frank's life, not as an imposter, not as a pawn, but as a genuine companion. The pretense had dissolved, replaced by something real. Frank called me into the study one night. He was leaning against his desk, his hands resting on the polished wood. "Henry, I have to tell you something," he said quietly. "I've lived a long time with regret. I've made millions, but I've lost something that can't buy back. And you, You've given me back a piece of my life I thought was gone forever. I swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. Dad, I started. Don't call me that lightly, he said with a faint smile. You've earned it by showing patience, loyalty, and kindness, qualities my son had. You remind me of him, Henry, and in helping me heal, you're healing yourself too. That night I stayed up staring at the ceiling of my guest room. For the first time, I realized that my life, the years of loneliness, the humiliation, the betrayal, had led me here. I thought of Lisa, of the bus that had taken her away, of the despair that had crushed me at the train station. And I realized something profound. She had not ended my life. She had unknowingly handed me a chance to start again. Weeks passed, and I began to take on more responsibility. I learned to manage staff schedules, oversee property repairs, and even mediate minor disputes among the workers. Frank encouraged me every step of the way, and I felt something I hadn't felt in decades: pride. And then came the turning point. Frank fell ill. A sudden fever, sharp pains. It left him bedridden and vulnerable. I stayed by his side, reading to him, making sure he ate, helping him with small tasks. The staff looked at me differently now, not just as someone pretending to be Frank's son, but as a son in spirit. One night, as I held his hand while he rested, he whispered, Henry, if anything happens to me, I want you to know, you've given this old man back a family, and now, I want to give you something in return. I felt my throat tighten. Dad, please, don't talk like that. I will, he said softly, because it's true. You've become family, and family looks after each other. You have my trust, my fortune, my legacy. But more than that, you have a place in my life. You've earned it, Henry, every single day. I didn't know what to say. Words felt useless against the weight of what he had given me. Not just wealth, not just safety, but belonging. For the first time, I felt like a man who had a future, not just a past full of regret. And somewhere deep inside, I knew that when the time came to face Lisa again, I would no longer be the broken man she left at a train station. I would be someone she couldn't ignore, someone who had been reborn, forged by pain, compassion, and the unexpected kindness of a blind billionaire. Months passed, and I had transformed in ways I never imagined possible. Living with Frank Sterling had given me more than wealth. It had given me purpose, confidence, and a sense of belonging I thought was lost forever. I had learned the ins and outs of his empire, earned the respect of his staff, and even attended high-level business meetings. And then one quiet morning, Frank called me into his study. The old man sat in his leather chair, frail yet resolute. Henry, he said softly, it's time I tell you something important. I'm leaving a significant portion of my estate to you. My wealth, my companies, everything I built. It's yours now. Not because you're my son by name, but because you became my son by heart. I froze. Words failed me. The enormity of what he was saying crushed and exhilarated me all at once. Dad, I don't know what to say. Say nothing, he smiled faintly. Just promise me you'll live a life that's worthy of the second chance you were given. A week later, Frank passed peacefully in his sleep. I held his hand as the staff and family gathered. The grief was heavy, but amidst it, I felt a sense of responsibility and inheritance far beyond money. I was no longer Henry, the abandoned, broken man at a train station. I was Henry Sterling, a man with a legacy and the means to shape his own future. And with that power came closure and reckoning. I thought of Lisa, her cold words, the bus that had left me stranded, the years she had treated me like I was invisible. She had walked away thinking she left me powerless. She had no idea what awaited her. I returned to the small town where it all began. The same dusty train station, the square where street vendors sold snacks, the bench where she had abandoned me. The memories hit me like waves: humiliation, betrayal, helplessness. I stood tall now, dressed in a tailored suit, polished shoes, and the quiet air of someone who had risen from nothing. I heard whispers as I walked through the square. People recognized the name. Some stared, some nodded respectfully, but my eyes were on one figure: Lisa. She was there with a man, older, less attentive than she had been to me. She hadn't changed much. Her hair pulled back, her expression guarded, but her eyes widened when they met mine. Recognition hit her first, and then fear. "Henry," she whispered. I smiled faintly, the smile of a man who had suffered, learned, and risen. "Hello, Lisa," I said, calm and composed. Her mouth opened, then closed. She took a step back. I, I didn't expect—" "You didn't expect me?" I interrupted, voice steady. "I know exactly what you expected. You expected a broken man. You expected the Henry you left at a train station, humiliated and powerless. But that man is gone." She looked around, realizing that people were noticing us, whispering, pointing. Her pride faltered. "You were right, Lisa," I continued. "I had nothing, until the day you left me. That moment changed everything." Tears welled in her eyes. I could see the shock, the regret, the fear, all the emotions she had once shown me in anger, now reflected back at her in the cold light of karma. I turned and walked toward my car. The BMW gleamed under the sun, a symbol of everything I had gained. Not just wealth, but dignity, respect, and the knowledge that I no longer needed her approval to exist. Lisa called after me, her voice trembling. "Henry, wait, please." I didn't turn. I didn't need to. She had had her chance. I had mine. As I drove away, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Freedom. The past could no longer touch me. I was a man reborn, forged by loss, shaped by kindness, and empowered by the life I had earned. The road stretched ahead, golden in the morning light. I glanced at the horizon, heart steady. A life I could finally call my own awaited, and I knew without a shadow of doubt that nothing would ever break me again.